Welcome to another edition of Whiskey, Games, and Nerd Stuff. Today's whiskey is actually vodka and cranberry juice. I've got Salt City vodka in here. It's really good. And today's Nerd Stuff is going to be talking about tariffs. And I'm actually going to use the Monopoly game board to kind of as a demonstration about how tariffs work and hopefully to help clear up some misconceptions that might be out there. The first thing I want to make sure everybody understands is tariffs are a tax. Companies pay this tax, not countries. So when you hear in the news that there's going to be a 20% or 25% tariff increase on products coming from Canada to the United States or from Mexico to the United States, Canada is not paying that tax. Mexico is not paying that tax. Any countries that are imposed that tariff are not paying that tax. It's the companies, and in this case, it'll be American companies, whether it's the importers or the manufacturers, and I'll use those terms interchangeably, or small businesses that are paying that tax. They are paying that tax, not the other countries. And I'll kind of use an example. So let's say I am a business owner, and I sell hats. And let's say my cost to manufacture and import, bring over a good for this hat is $10. My cost to produce this hat to get it is $10. That's including everything. I'm putting everything in the cost, the manufacturing, the shipping, the tariff, the whole thing. And let's say that I sell this same hat for $12, meaning I'm making a $2 profit. $2 gross margin, $2 gross profit. I'm going to use those terms interchangeably. But basically, I'm making $2 or 20%. It cost me $10 to manufacture, produce it, ship it, and I'm selling it for $2, 20%. So now let's say I'm getting these hats for this particular case, I'm getting from Mexico, and a 20% tariff is just across the board is on all goods imported from Mexico into the United States. Well, that 20% now means it's going to cost me $12 to produce the same individual hat. And if I go to sell that same hat for that same $12, I am no longer making any money. I'm not making any money. So for me to make money, I would actually have to increase that cost. Now, one of two things is going to happen. If I can either sell this hat and make no money, or I can sell this hat for more, and the consumer, my customers, you, the listeners, would pay more money. So in turn, you're paying more. You're the one that's paying the tax, not that country. Now, if I wanted to make that same 20% gross margin, gross profit on a hat that now costs me $10, I will now have to sell this same hat for $15 to keep that same 20% across the board, meaning that you, the customer, are paying $3 more for that hat. Now, what could happen is, this is where it's going to hurt small businesses, is I may, as a business, I might have sold 10 units, 1,000 units, 10,000 units. So regardless of how many units I was selling, more than likely, I'm going to sell less hats now. I'm going to sell less hats because they're going to cost more. And it's not just this hat that's going to cost the consumer more money. It's every product that they're purchasing that's going to be that's imported from countries. So what's going to happen is I might have had a situation where I had $1 million business selling hats. I was doing good. I was going to hire a couple more workers to help, package and ship the orders and do fulfillment and all that stuff. But now, because my sales might have been reduced, I may not be able to hire more workers, more American workers. I might not be able to pay my workers as much as I would. I might not be able to have that extra money to advertise my cool looking metal hats. And that's just one way that these tariffs can impact small businesses. Now, of course, you might say, well, why can't you have that hat manufactured and made in the United States, and then bypass the tariff all around, so you wouldn't have to increase the cost of the hat for your customer. And that's a great point. It's a valid question, but the harsh reality is it can be cheaper to produce this hat, and this is a reason why some products are imported in. It's cheaper to have this hat made and produced in another country, have it shipped to the United States than it is to have it made in the United States. And it's not always so simple either. If you want to make something in the United States, you still actually have to get the materials and the components to make said product. And before I go on, I'm going to take a sip and explain something and give you an example, a perfect example of why it's not so simple. And I'm using Monopoly for another reason. It wasn't just because the money and the catch the eye. So Hasbro is an American company. It's an American company founded in 1923. It's a publicly traded company. And, the reason that some people that watch this channel, Hasbro, of course, know they acquired Wizards of the Coast, which makes Magic the Gathering, D&D back in I want to say it was 1999-ish, give or take. So one of the things that's going to happen is you earlier the valid question was, why don't you have that hat produced in the United States? Well, and of course my response is it could be that I could make the hat in the United States, but some of the materials I need to make the hat, or the company that I would engage to make the hat, they may need to get the materials from another country. And this Monopoly game is a perfect example. Here on the bottom on the left-hand box, and this is a Monopoly game that I just bought within the last week. It says, made in the USA with dice and tokens made in China. So, these tokens were made in China. If there is a tariff on goods manufactured in China brought to the United States, the tariff would have been on these particular pieces. You can say that you're going to have a product made in the United States, but more often than not, the raw materials that you're going to need to make said goods is actually going to have to be imported from somewhere else. And that somewhere else is going to have an additional cost to it. If there's additional cost to it, someone's going to have to pass it along. And this is another area where a tariff can really hurt a small business. So we go back to that example as it did cost me $10 to make the hat, but now I've got to, with that 20% tariff, it's now going to cost $12. Well, if I'm a larger company, let's pretend it's not a hat. Let's pretend it's another product. A large company who has a decent amount in the coffers, they can sell this particular product, this hat, for $12, not make any profit for a quarter, for 2 quarters, for a year maybe. Well, unfortunately, a smaller business, they cannot maintain that. They're not going to have that cash flow. They're not going to have access to capital where they can sell that particular product at no profit. So again, they're either going to have to sell that for $15, and what's going to happen is a consumer who may want to support local businesses, small businesses, as opposed to a multinational company, they would like to support that, but they're going to have to pay extra money, whereas they can go to a local box store and pay cheaper for that product. So this is an area where it does hurt small businesses. And we can get into things like where there's specific taxes or we can get into where there's specific tariffs on a specific unit. For example, a car. You might have a situation where cars from a particular company are going to get a tariff, say $2,000 per car. So whether it's a $20,000 car or a $100,000 car, that tariff tax, that specific tax would be $2,000 per unit. And then you could have a situation, it's called ad valorem tariff, where they can say, we're going to do a percentage based on the value. Typically that's on agricultural and things like that. One thing to keep in mind is I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an economics expert. I'm just a guy who likes whiskey, games, and nerd stuff, and who just makes YouTube videos. I would highly encourage you to do your own research, look into things specifically about tariffs, how they work. I would just ask you, before you start advocating for or against tariffs or for or against tariffs with specific countries, I would say look into the companies that you work for. Do they directly or indirectly do business with other countries? Where do they get, how does their supply line work? Where do they get their merchandise? How is it going to affect you as a worker? How is it going to affect your company? And then also take a look at what you buy in a 30-day period. Go through. In fact, the next time you go to the grocery store, take a look at every single good you buy. Look at where it comes from and ask yourself if there is a 10%, 20%, 30% tariff on that specific good, how much more will it cost you? And if it's going to cost you more, someone's going to say, well, then I can just buy a product from somewhere else. Well, if it's coffee, there's only so many places that you can go to get, a good coffee from, right? And usually what will happen is if prices go up on a particular commodity, they're going to go up across the board. But there's good questions out to ask yourself. There's good sources to look for. There's a lot of good data out there. I would look at the various news sites. I would, research different magazines. I would look at to see what the experts say, then look at what your own research is. And then if it's something where you find that, hey, here is something that I went and did and I looked at, and you know what, you're right. I saw that this specific good was going to get increased. It's going to cost me more. Make a comment in the comment section. If you find that it doesn't affect you one little bit, make a comment in the comment section. And of course, some folks are going to say, well, hey, we increase tariffs to make revenue. Yeah, there are three primary reasons why countries increase tariffs. One is to raise revenue. But let's keep it in mind. When we raise the tariff against another country, that country does not pay that tax. Ultimately, that tax is passed on to either the purchaser, the importer, and most likely the consumer. Another thing that gets often brought up is you're trying to protect a specific business sector. But there's lots of cases out there, and again, do your own research, where it actually hurt local businesses. And it also can hurt consumers, because if you're going to protect a specific business sector and there is no competition for that business sector, then those prices always don't stay low. If I only have one place to go get something, then there's really no incentive for a company to have good quality products at a decent price and have an innovative product. You have a stagnation there. The other reason, which is a very good reason that you have tariffs, is for influence. Now, there's a double-edged sword there. Influence can be for a positive or a negative, and unfortunately, you have to consider the unintended consequences. So usually what will happen is a country doesn't like something another country did, so they're using tariffs as a negotiation tactics to say, okay, we're going to raise this tariff unless you do A, B, or C. The problem, though, is it can also backfire on you. I might raise tariffs on country A by 25%. They, in turn, are going to raise tariffs on me by 25%. And ultimately, I hurt my economy more than I hurt their economy. The other thing that can happen is if it's just kind of one of those things where if you instigate and poke and prod all your allies, all your friends, all the people that want to work with you, at some point they're going to wake up one day and go, we don't need you. We're going to get together and work with somebody who's a little more respectful, who will work with us, not against us. So you got to be really careful, and you want to have a situation where you want to have that influence. You want countries to work with you. You want businesses to work with you. You want people to work with you. There's an old saying that you catch more flies with honey than you do vinegar. And that is a good key to negotiation, is you want to look at the long term and the short term. You want to look at the intended and the unintended consequences. But hopefully I kind of did a good little spiel in here on how tariffs work, how it could affect a small business. And if you would like me to get into more details or do a video on the pros and cons of tariffs, we can get into a video of here are the pros, here are the cons, get into different type of tariffs, get into more specific information. Or if there's other topics that you would like me to talk about when I smatter it in with these other videos, please leave a comment in the comment section. I really do appreciate everybody taking the time to watch this video. Please like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Would love to hear your comments. Just ask you to be respectful. If you're trying to make a point, make the point. If you've got some stuff that you want to cite, feel free to cite it. And until next time, folks, cheers.